Welcome to the Emily the Mystic Show. You're about to walk through a portal that leads to all things mystical, magical, spiritual, and supernatural. I'm your host, Emily. I'm a spiritual mentor, an Akashic Records practitioner and teacher, an intuition development coach, and a galactic channeler. If you're an old soul on a self-discovery and healing journey, you are in the right place. We'll be diving in deep to some of my favorite mystical topics, including manifestation, past lives, the spirit world, energy, and so much more. Get ready to embrace your inner mystic and live your most authentic life possible. The portal is now open.
Hello, my dear listener. Welcome to a very spicy episode of the Emily the Mystic Show podcast. Perfect in time for Valentine's Day and your Valentine's Day listening. I'm excited to share with you this mystical guest who is Baljit. Baljit and I have known each other for many years now from some different circles that we used to run in the spiritual community. And I can't wait for you to get to know her and for her to share her unique magic with you. So to give you an introduction, Baljit is a certified sexologist, an authentic Tantra practitioner, an intuitive mentor, a DJ, and a producer. Baljit takes her clients on a journey to rediscover their purpose, gifts, and talents by connecting them back to their sexual power so they can express their true potential. She's able to bridge the connection to what is happening for someone sexually and how that relates to them on a soul level. By looking at patterns that no longer serve them, she works with them to unlock their deepest desire to create prosperity, peace, and embodiment. Committed to raising the vibration of humanity, Baljit has worked with thousands of people worldwide to uplevel their lives by uncovering the truth of who they are to their core, creating profound results in their businesses and relationships. She believes everything in this world is energy, and getting to the root of desire by connecting people back to their sexual power causes a powerful ripple that spans all areas of life. Ooh, I love it. Welcome, Baljit, to the show.
Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. And can you share with us where you are located?
I am currently in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Love it. And what is your astrology, sun, moon, and rising?
So I'm a Leo, and my rising sun is Leo, and my rising moon is in Gemini.
I feel like that's just the archetypal energy that I would expect for a sexologist, if I'm being honest. So very spot on. I love it. And what is your human design type?
Manifesting generator.
Which makes sense that we are a master of all things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Baljit, we want to get to know you and how you got here. So let's dive into your story. Where do you want to begin?
Well, a lot of people ask me like, how did I end up doing what I'm doing now? And my past life, I want to say in this lifetime, I used to be an architectural technologist. So this was like in my early 20s. And I worked in the architectural industry for about 7 years. So I had no connection to energy healing and just this whole realm. And I was stuck in this corporate life, this job, and kind of living the Sex and the City life, like very typical, just go out, party, be with friends. But I was such a people pleaser because I was raised in a very strict South Asian upbringing. So, I was taught to always please others and please the family and please society as well. And I saw how that trickled into my workplace. So I was very much disconnected from my purpose and also the pressure at that time. I mean, my parents are completely different, but at that time when I was like in my 20s, my early 20s, they're like, okay, you're going to get married. I'm like, no, I'm not. But that really impacted me on a mental level of the expectations from society, from family, from everything, so much that I had developed a panic disorder. I was having constant panic attacks. I didn't realize that I was depressed. I just thought that was normal. And long story short, I was on antidepressants, and then I was like, I just had this funny feeling. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So I went to a naturopathic doctor and a homeopathic doctor that helped me kind of like wean off these antidepressants. And through that, I kind of had this like 180 awakening where I found our former mentor for Akashic Records, and learned the Akashic Records. And when I discovered that, I was like, wow, this thing is like so different. And it was like a game changer in my life. And I realized how much a victim I was to my own circumstances, and how I was so disconnected from my own emotional body, even my physical body. And so when I started to connect back to my body and my emotions, I like dropped like 20 pounds from the antidepressants that I had been taking, because it just kind of disconnected me even more. And then I really came home to understanding like why the panic attacks were happening and where did the depression come from. And that's when I really wanted to dive into this whole intuitive realm. So became an Akashic Record consultant and teacher, and delved into Reiki and other energy healing modalities, and started channeling my own method through psychogeometry called soul blueprints or activations. And that just started to come through naturally while I was still working at the architect firm. So I had two different lives. And then eventually I moved across the country to be along in the West Coast, because at the time I was living in the East Side, near the East Coast. And when I was living along the West Coast, I was like, okay, this is getting tiring because I'm overworking at the architect firm. That doesn't feel authentic to me. And now this whole realm of energy healing and coaching really started to come forward. So I took a leap of faith and decided to go all in with mentorship. So from 2009 up until now, that's what I've been doing. And then how the sexual energy piece started to come in was when people wanted to know what their purpose was, like their gifts. We'd always end up talking about their sexual energy and the impact of what happens to them when they're not connected, and how that relates to their mission. And further on, that's when I decided to become a board certified sexologist and a Tantra practitioner to bring in somatic pieces to help people be able to connect to their sexual energy. Because even when we work in the energetic realm, it's so easy to kind of dance around it and not like really come into the body. So I was like, no, we need this embodiment piece. Like we literally need to work with the genitals, but also see how that relates to how we show up in our body. And it's been like a massive game changer. And even on a personal level, like I've started DJing a while back and learned how to produce music, but I would say it wasn't until I really went all in with sexology and tantra that the music started to really come forward a lot, because I've been able to like alchemize it so much that now I'm like in full music production. It's my life is sacred sexuality and music. So that's where I am today.
Oh my gosh, I love that journey. I can relate to so much of what you shared, especially working in the corporate job and being so disconnected from the body, and finding ways, especially through medication, to like help yourself feel better and put a Band-Aid on it. And then really coming back home to yourself when you decide that you're ready for something different.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the listener can relate to a lot of that as well.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And so with this journey of coming into your own body, when did you start really working with your own sexual energy? Like, what journey was that like for you? How did that unfold?
Well, it's so interesting because I've always been so fascinated around sexual energy, like right from the get-go in 2000, like 8 and 9, when I started this healing journey. I was like, I was trying to understand like why people were choosing certain relationships like polyamory and what energy, like Tantra, white Tantra, and all this stuff. I'm like, what is all this? Like there's this whole realm that still felt a little taboo. And I just felt like there was something deeper to it than just over the surface. I really was wanting to understand. And prior to all this happening, like when I used to work in the architectural industry, I had certain um, uh, things that had happened to me personally where through a few of my former work that I used to, places that I used to work at, where a former boss of mine actually made a pass, and he had everything planned to have an affair with me. And I was like, wait, what? I was thrown out of it. And there was this pattern of like, it was kind of funny. It was like older white men that were like in their 60s, and I'm like in my 20s, like that just expected for me to have an affair with them. And I was like, this is a weird pattern. Like, where is this coming from? Is this like, was I a courtesan in some other lifetime? Like, is this some past life interference, or is it something in my own, like internal cultural upbringing that it's bringing some sort of exotification, or I don't know what. It just kept happening. And so I wanted to break this pattern and find out like why this was coming up. And I worked in the records and the Akashic records to just do a lot of healing around my own sexual energy and feeling safe. And then also the patterns of like around women, like there was a pattern, both men and women, with men who would share that they felt threatened by me, like literally would say they feel scared. And I'm like, why are you scared? I'm like, Elmo, like, I don't understand. Like, but they were just scared. And then with women, I just noticed there was a pattern with like, not all, but just a few where there was this element of threat energy where they felt threatened. And I was like, huh. So I was like, what is that? But I knew it had to do with my own sexual energy. And I was like, how does this relate to my own sexual energy? Where, like, what is it that I'm subconsciously even putting out there that's, either pushing up against like someone's pattern as well, where they believe that they're threatened, or it's like they believe that I'm like the answer to their marital problems. And so I, it was based on weird sexual dynamics that I would witness and be approached with. It was knocking on my door so many times. And I was like, okay, let's dive in. So that's how I really bridged the Akashic work. And then it wasn't until when I started doing the Tantra work and understanding just my own genitals in general that I felt this de-armor happening inside of me. And I was like, oh, like I still have a bit of numbness. Like this is part of like me fawning and people pleasing and how that shows up in my genitals, but how that has showed up in my relationship, for example, with women where I would fawn and not like if I felt that they felt threatened by me, I would dim myself down. I would also dim my sexual energy down as well, to feel safe and make them quote unquote feel safe. Um, and then for men, it was similar. It would be into this people pleaser energetic mode. And obviously that's not going to work. So there was all these intricate dynamics. And then something just shifted where, and the biggest piece was my trauma response was fawning. And I had no idea what fawning was. And it wasn't until I found out, like when I was learning to become a tantric practitioner and a sexologist, I was like, oh shit, like I've actually been living my life this way. I've been fawning with my sexual energy the entire time. And then something just shifted, like 180 again, where I let go of some close female relationships that actually weren't alignment anymore, and even said my goodbyes. And the way that people showed up with me just started to shift as well. But I started to be able to communicate more clear, and just with my boundaries. And musically, I started to have more space. Like I started to have more space to be creative because that wasn't being taken up to, you know, hold so much space that doesn't need to be there, you know? So it was like, I that's what was my version of misdirecting my sexual energy. It was like I wasn't giving myself permission to accept my own creativity and let that be, you know, shown.
100%. I think that's such a beautiful journey. And thank you for sharing all of that with your experiences. It's so fascinating where we're led exactly where we need to be through witnessing our own patterns and how we're showing up in our relationships.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, I would love to hear you describe in your own words what is sexual energy through a spiritual lens?
Yeah. So sexual energy to me, like through my own lens, is a creative life force energy. And we are manifestations of this creative life force energy. We're here in our human body. We come from sexual energy, and then that sexual energy came through the act of sex, and boom, here we are. Like it's full, all universal creation. Um, and so when we learn to really connect with it and be able to use it for the highest good, then we're really living in alignment with our mission and our gifts. When we choose to not connect with our sexual energy, meaning we avoid it, we don't want to look at it, we leave it as I call it the side dish versus the main dish. That's when our sexual energy can be misdirected because it's like we don't want to look at it. We're like, oh, nope. And so it has to go somewhere. So it stagnates, but then it can go into addiction. It could go into porn addiction, social media addiction, food addiction, sugar, because there's a misdirected need. Like there's a need that's not being fulfilled. It can go into unhealthy relationships. It can go into being a rescuer. It can go into all these different things that aren't necessarily serving your highest good. So when you're able to release all the misconceptions, because obviously the reason why someone would be avoiding or dismissing it is because of whatever misconceptions were brought up culturally, religiously, parental programming, societal programming. Like there's so much programming that's been projected onto what sexual energy is so much that someone can feel shameful to connect with it. And so once we embody that universal truth of what that means for us, then we can feel safe of like, oh yeah, this is who we are. It's like innate within us. So why not connect with it?
That's wow. Yes. Love that. Love everything that you said. How would you describe the experience of someone who is in their highest expression of their sexual energy in essence? Like, what does that look like in someone's
Yeah.
life?
Yeah. You know, what's really cool in the way that I witnessed it is that everyone is so different in their highest form of their sexual energy. And that what's so cool about it is that they really come into their own uniqueness. Like they're really embodying in their truth, this innate wisdom of being able to express themselves and almost like not giving a fuck of like what other people say. So they're just like, there's this deeper level of like embodiment that happens and almost like a fierce mama bear, whether it's like, you know, external or even internal and how they express themselves. But it's just like this energy. You don't even have to say anything to know that it's there. So it's the way that someone shows up in their body, more of the presence and energy versus more of like what they're doing. Um, and and through that, it's like you can feel that they're really deeply connecting to their intuition and that whatever they're creating and putting out there sounds and feels like their frequency. So that's how I can tell of like, oh, they're really tapping into this deeper level of themselves. And even their raw expressions, like even the pieces where they're acknowledging their emotions, if they've had some downs and they're like, yeah, you know, I had a shitty day. and but then knowing how to alchemize that, not staying into that that emotion, knowing how to shift that energy allows me to see, oh, they know how to like alchemize it. They know how to move that energy in their own creative way. Like I kind of look at, you know, the products that are being manifested through them, and or how they're speaking and how they're sharing. So that's how I can see that. Yeah.
And I think that's really important to say, because I think because our society is often very over sexualized.
Yeah.
And I think we often see, and maybe to someone listening to this who may not fully understand this, they may think, oh, someone fully being in their sexual energy means that they're showing up like in very sexy outfits and they're kind of more outward. Like, we think about OnlyFans and we think about sort of that entrepreneurial space where we're kind of stepping into that over sexualization.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that this is, again, something that we all have access to, and we don't have to, maybe expressing it in that way is for the highest good of someone, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it reminds me of, I remember I talked about this in one of a summit that I did last year that I was involved in. And I got this response from this random female. She messaged me back, and she clearly didn't like hear what I was saying about connecting with sexual energy. She translated it as, you have to have a lot of sex to, manifest your mission. And she's like, you don't have to have a lot of sex. And I was like, well, that's not what I said. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I was like, even if you have a lot of sex and you're disconnected from your sexual energy, even if you do OnlyFans or whatever, and you're disconnected from your sexual energy, you're still misdirecting it. So having lots of sex, like physical sex, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to align to your mission if you're disconnected from your body, if you haven't healed any trauma or your blocks, or it's how you're showing up and how you're sharing your sexual energy as well. So connecting with your sexual energy means you're actually deeply listening to your intuition, but you're deeply listening to your womb. For men, like their sacral, and really connecting to this deeper part of yourself. From there, hey, maybe you are guided to do OnlyFans, but it's coming from a more empowering place versus a disempowering place. And so that's where I feel like it can get stuck in the three lower chakras of like, and that's a societal programming where it's really separated sexual energy from our heart space and our expression. And so then that's why it's become such a taboo topic, because it has been treated so separately, but then it just becomes this lower state of, I want to say, vibration of how it's being treated. And for some people, they can dive into those realms, but it's knowing how to bring it back into the light, like when you're going into the dark and bringing it back to the light, because we do need to alchemize. Um, and but I agree. Like I feel like with the over sexualization of the stuff, people have a misconception of what that means of connecting to their sexual energy.
And you brought up something really interesting too that I would love to hear about as well, which is, do you see a difference in how sexual energy gets expressed depending on your gender identity? So in men versus women, what does that look like? Can you explain that a little bit as well?
Yeah, for men, well, even for both genders, there is a similarity, but for men, I notice more of a primal embodiment and more of a less fight or flight state, because um, it's like and it's the same for women, but it's like we've kind of learned how to go into that parasympathetic system to be in this safe state in our body. So then how we show up, we're just not anxious or in fight or flight all the time. And that can be expressed actually through both genders, where it's like constantly like dating people that you shouldn't be dating. For men, it's like access porn. So for men, it's like I've noticed that there's less porn consumption because they're being mindful of their energy. but I can see the chi in them. So in advanced practices, I teach men how to do semen retention. So when they learn how to retain their semen, um, then there's a difference in how they show up in their body and even their own essence. They have more energy. They even look more vital. They feel more in their power, and they actually feel more aligned to their mission because they're not constantly leaking their energy all the time. And of course, once in a while, it is important for men to ejaculate, but it also depends on the age as well. So there's a whole um, thing with Taoism around the different stages of time when a man should ejaculate and how that affects their energy levels. So it's just how they show up in their body and the calmness and I want to say like focus and the ability to create from that space versus the need for, validation or the need to be seen. It's like coming out of this wound of wanting to be seen and accepted and instead it's like they're coming into this place of um wanting to protect and provide and anchor. There's like this anchor is the only way I can describe it. With women, it's almost like more of a groundedness and softness, but not always softness on, everyone's unique in their own ways. But I've just noticed with women, there's more of a permission to pause when needed, not feeling like they always have to like put stuff out on social media. It's like, wait, I can just like let myself rest. Right. So being able to listen to the cycle, like their menstrual cycle or just the cycle when they feel like it's time to just pause and then come back into doing something. So there's a deeper level of listening. And again, it is with both genders, but it plays out in different ways.
Beautifully answered. I'm excited to learn more about Tantra and some of the practices. I have so many questions. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask the first question and then I'll just have you talk about all of it, which is, because I'm sure these are connected. If someone listening is feeling disconnected from their sexual energy, where do we begin? Are there some things that we can tap into on our own that can help us start working with that connection? And then if you could talk about Tantra and how you work with your clients as well, that would be great.
Yeah. So for someone who feels disconnected from their sexual energy, a nice start is to just create like a uninterrupted space free of any distractions where you can feel safe in your environment and just taking one hand on the heart, the other hand on your sacral, um, and just taking some deep, big breaths and visualizing the energy from the heart space going down into the sacral and just feeling into how your sacral feels. Does it feel tight? Does it feel numb? Do you feel like an emotion come up? So bringing some awareness. So the first step is bringing awareness and to have compassion. Sometimes I witness clients that can be so hard on themselves. Like it's like they they just want to be multi-orgasmic the next day. And I'm like, this takes time, especially if you've been sexually violated or, experienced other forms of trauma. It could be other things that were non-sexual when you were a child or growing up that actually impacts on how you show up in your genitals. It does. And that's why everything is interrelated. So anytime where, maybe your safety was taken away when you were younger, that relates to our root chakra, like our safety and well-being, that can shift into security and insecurity and fear. And so how that can show up with your genitals is this form of numbness or a fight or flight state or pain or irritation. So paying attention, especially if you do have sexual reproductive ailments, any kind of issues around there, um, really going deeper and being like, okay, what is the root cause? I keep having yeast infections, or I have endometriosis, or whatever that might be, going into the question of like, okay, well, what is the root cause? And it's okay that you don't know exactly what it is, but even writing it down and journaling about where you feel the pain or the ache in, that womb region, for example. So awareness is the first step. And the next step, that is really your intuition that's guiding you and being like, oh, I need to do this somatic practice, or I need to go see this therapist, or because again, everyone's different and what is needed for them to help them unravel what's going on for them.
Yes, 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 yes. So important. It brings up just an interesting sort of side question, which I like to connect this through the different modalities that I work with, human design being one of them. Do you know, as a manifesting generator, if you are a sacral authority?
I'd have to go back to my chart, but it wouldn't surprise me. I think I have a strong sacral. I have to go back to it. Yeah.
That's what prompted the question, because I'm a manifesting generator with a sacral authority and feel very connected to that creative essence and that energy, and have always felt that way. But I could see how that may not feel natural to
someone else,
people who's designed differently. So that just kind of got my brain thinking.
Oh, now I'm going to check. I have to check now. I will to let you know.
100%. And yes, thank you also to speaking to sexual trauma as well, because I know that's a big thing that comes up for many people. It's something I do work with my clients on behind closed doors, through the Akashic Records lens, through the spiritual lens. And it's it can be really heavy and can be really scary for people to be open to open that door into that level of healing, because it really brings forward times in your life where you were violated and where that essence and energy was violated and taken from you. So for anyone who's listening to this, who has been through that or who resonates with that, it's important in my opinion as well to make the time to really sit with yourself and like get to know your body and get to know your energy, because a big part of that journey is learning how to take your power back too.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So getting back to my question about Tantra, what is that?
So there's many definitions of Tantra. Tantra was developed in India several thousand years ago, and there's different kinds of Tantra. In the end, like the overall way that I see Tantra is more of like a self-realization, being able to connect to your body, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, a whole embodiment and a whole way of being, and even a whole way of connecting with your sexual energy. And there's also Tantra that's out there that's non-sexual as well. A lot of the Eastern methods are non-sexual. And then there's Neo-Western Tantra, which basically takes Eastern practices and weave it into the Western. So we call that Neo-Tantra. So, and that could be combined with different practices. I've come from a lineage-based Tantra. So it's Tibetan Tantra through the Shangpa Kagyu lineage. And it's to weave light and sound and form. So we focus on the central channel. So if you can visualize a white straw that starts at the top of the head and ends down to the perineum that just sits in front of the spine, we focus as that as our central channel. And out of that are all these other channels, we'll call them nadis, that are, in your body. And if they come into knots per se, that's where we can experience physical ailments or emotional or mental, etc. And with Tibetan Tantra, there's these 5 elements that we focus on. So fire, earth, space, air, and water. And whatever element is needed, we actually do like a meditation practice. And then these can also be expressed as well in sexually with Tibetan Tantra. So I've been given the transmissions to practice Tibetan Tantra on a sexual level. And that's what a lot of the students have learned as well. So you're basically getting your energy body prepared to be able to do these kind of practices. And what I love about it is, authentic Tantra, which I've learned from, is that it's been infused with the somatic practices of breath work. We use this technique called ocean breathing. And then vulva mapping, we call it orgasmic awareness practice. It's like a form of edging. So not chasing for that orgasm, like learning to rest into pleasure so you can expand your orgasmic capacity. And then actually learning linga massage and yoni massage. So a full tantric self-pleasure practice. So it's a full realm that bridges I want to say that the Tibetan Eastern practice into getting the energy body ready and prepared for a deeper level of healing. And what's so profound about it is it's like I can feel my ancestors, and it's really wild. It's like you can feel all of your ancestors as well. It's very, very deep. Yeah.
That's so incredible. And I'm so glad you shared all of that, because I think coming from more of a Western look at Tantra, I think sometimes we have this preconceived notion of like the Karma Sutra and like sex positions and like all of this, and that it has to be with a partner. But I love that you share and you work with someone on an individual level, because that's so beautiful.
Very important. And even when I worked with couples, and I still do, I've noticed each time I'm like, we need to go individually as well, because there's their own story of why things are showing up physically for them when they're trying to be intimate with one another, because they have their own stories. And until they've healed that within themselves, doesn't matter who they choose to partner up with, they're going to always keep coming to head with the same pattern. And I love that you brought up the Kama Sutra, because even people have a massive misconception around the Kama Sutra. And the Kama Sutra was very big in the sense that it was something that was passed down for women to learn, and for men to learn about. And I would say in other Eastern cultures as well, there's other sexual practices before, I would say, colonization, came through. and so India definitely has a lot of history, I would say, that has really, repressed, I want to say, our sexual energy. But even in other countries that have experienced repression through this time of, I want to say, like colonization on so many levels. So I feel like that's what we're also moving through collectively. And then, and I would even say, like, weirdly on a galactic level as well, like beyond what the human brain can understand. And then, I just feel like when people think about Tantra, they think it's just about sex, and it's like way more than that. Like, sex is just like the byproduct of, of, what we're doing, but it's also how it's being done as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm on a journey this year to master my health and feel my absolute best while having consistent high energy levels. And so I decided to get some labs to test to see how my hormones were looking, as well as to check for any imbalances within my body. And so I decided to get lab work done through an incredible company called Joy Wellness. That's spelled JOI Wellness. And you can get your lab work done through this amazing company while also getting a unique supplement regimen just for you to support your health. They also provide a variety of different wellness options and health coaching for helping you get your energy levels back and feel your best. So if you want to do high vibrational lab work like I did, you can use code Emily the Mystic at checkout to get your labs at a discounted rate. Is there anything on a galactic level that you feel called to share that you've witnessed or had the experience of learning with your clients?
Well, I've noticed in my own personal journey when I started studying Tantra and like doing the sexology course and the Tantra program was I felt like I was clearing stuff here on a human level, but I felt like something was clearing on a galactic level where I felt like something was being lifted from me that it felt like I was coming out of a galactic war. I don't know how to describe it, but I'm going to say over the last few years, something, especially last year, I feel like something shifted um, that unlocked my creativity that I didn't even realize that I was holding space for on a psychic galactic level. And then how I've seen it with clients is I've seen clients who've come to me and they were like, Baljit, I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes I've had dreams and there's aliens having sex with me or something. And they look like they're being hijacked, right? So, and they're so scared to even connect to their sexual energy, but they have come to me because they know I understand that stuff. They would sound weird if they went to someone who didn't understand energy healing and went to like a therapist, right? so retraining the nervous system on that level of galactic interference where they may have had some visitations and perhaps worked with a spiritual mentor who siphoned their sexual energy. I think that's very important to bring forward because whether it's through medicines or just energy healing as well, it's important to understand who the facilitator is and just where they're at with their own energy and how I work with so many who've had their sexual energy siphoned because there was like their mentor was threatened by them or something. So, yeah.
Yeah. I have seen that, what you described with the dreams and the galactic interference with a lot of my clients. So that is something that we do clear in the records because, yes, the galactic warfare, and unfortunately, we're aware of the human trafficking and the dark things that exist on our planet with a sexual nature. They do exist galactically. You know, that can be hard to hear, but it is a thing. Yep. And yes, it is something that we do address in the Akashic realm if you feel like there is interfering energy for you with your own sexual nature.
Yeah. And I've had to do like when I've done in-person work with some people, I've had to do like entity removals. So like just random things, like no biggie. So yeah, those things exist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to switch gears a little bit and chat about how this work can benefit you in relationship, because I feel like a big part of that is how you show up in your sexual relationship with your partner, your spouse, whoever that is. Because my big portion of my listener base are married or in a committed partnership. So let me think of how I want to phrase my question.
I can answer that for you. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Definitely how it can improve the relationship is through communication. Because once you start to connect to your sexual energy, so if you think about like our yonis, right? It's parallel to our larynx, our throat chakra. So if our yonis, like our sexual reproductive organs, like are contracting and are shut down, we'll feel contracted in our expression and not being able to express our needs, our wants. Very similar with men as well, just feeling shut down. So once a person is able to connect back to their sexual energy, there's a natural way of being able to express themselves again because there's no longer a filter. like a trauma response filter, a fight or flight or freeze or fawn. It's just like a natural, non-reactive response. It's coming from a deeper level of truth, and the communication is different as well. So how one communicates is massive. And I keep forgetting who this quote's from, but she says communication is lubrication. I'm like, that's totally what it is, because that's why, certain things can happen in a relationship where you just kind of lose touch sexually or whatever, because, life goes on and you're bound to come up with, um, different things from time to time where things shift on a sexual level. But if you're not communicating it and honoring those shifts, that's where that sexual energy can really stagnate. And a lot of people sometimes don't know how to communicate their own needs as well.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that your biggest advice for spicing things up in the bedroom at this time of the year is communication?
Yes. Just communication is lubrication.
I love it.
And again, communication, with authentic tantra, like we've incorporated nonviolent communication. So there's a way of how you communicate, right? It's like you're not going to be like, honey, I hate it when you do this to me, or don't do that. Obviously he's going to shut down. More like, babe, I love it when you just like put some more pressure here. It feels really good. Then it gives feedback to, that person of like, oh, she likes it when I do this, right? And vice versa. So it's important to know how to communicate as well. Yeah. So loving requests.
Yes, 100%. And I find too that sometimes as women, and how do I want to say this? For women, it's so important that we've been coming into this age of empowerment and being able to like take charge and be passionate and be master manifestors and creating our dreams and all of these things. But I also find too that we have to create space for our male partners to show up as well. And sometimes we can have a little bit of a subtle pattern where we may unintentionally be emasculating them or kind of stepping all over them or not creating the space for them to show up in partnership and in co-creation with us as well. So I think it's important as women that we recognize our leadership and our ability to, be in our divine feminine. But being in our divine feminine also means creating space for our men to lead us as well.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any guidance or ideas or tips for how a woman listening can embody more of her divine feminine essence?
Definitely doing the inner work of the sacral. Because sometimes when we think about feminine essence, and I just think of it in a humoristic way where I've seen online where it's like they're just floating in their dresses and lighting a candle, but so disconnected at times, right? So definitely like when you learn how to really connect to your womb space, like really deeply connect and feel into the story of the womb and find that space, whether it's a group of women or a practitioner, or maybe it's even like an audiobook on Spotify that helps you to be able to navigate this piece. Because I feel we all have access to this. It's not just like one special person that does. Like a lot of women believe that, oh, some other women can be multi-orgasmic and she can squirt, but I can't. But we actually all can. It's just the layers of blocks that we've instilled within ourselves from a child, from a baby, from our mother's womb. And so understanding your own like womb story and like going there is just deeply important. And again, awareness is the first step. You don't have to know like everything, and you're more than likely not going to know everything, because especially if you have trauma, there's a readiness for you to receive the integration. And on some level, you're probably not ready yet, and that's okay, but you want to be gentle with the process.
Gentleness, definitely key. Yes.
Yeah.
Because I know this process can open up a lot of doorways and a lot of cans of worms, I'm sure, into things that may be repressed or suppressed, especially emotionally. So yes, it's a process that needs to be taken with care for sure.
Yeah.
And pivoting a little bit, I want to hear about the way that you channel your energy as a DJ and as being a music producer. So what does that look like?
Yeah. So with DJing, I have a SoundCloud under Antakarana, and that's my DJ and producer name, which means rainbow bridge in Sanskrit. So bridging um, the spiritual into the physical realm. And for me, when I create like a DJ set, I really actually tune into each track of like what I want to mix into. And I feel into, does this track feel like it's going to like pick people up or give them like a good mood? So when I create the sets, it's more of like an intuitive feeling of like, yeah, this needs to be in here. It feels like it's, you know, going to pick someone up or just like get them through the day. So I've gone, and the reason why I've been doing them, and I've been doing like sets for podcasts internationally, which has been awesome. But more importantly, um, the responses that I get from people, they're just like, hey, I was moving and this got me through the day. Like I had to listen to this 4 times because I was having a shitty day, or I can only work if I listen to your DJ sets. Like I get so much shit done. So there's obviously that creative energy that's being infused with the sacral, that sacral fire. And with that intention is to help people connect to their own sacral fire as well for their own creation to get unstuck from whatever it is that they're doing. And then the producing, I've been really exploring the realms of my own South Asian heritage and adding snippets of that and putting it into like deep house electronic music. So right now I'm working on an EP for a big label, which is super exciting. Almost done the 3rd track for it, and then working on a few remixes. But oh, it's been so much fun because I have my clients during the day, and then I'll even take a moment, depending on the day, to do my own practice. So it might be a self-pleasure practice, maybe yoni yoga, so working with the jade egg. Or I definitely go for walks in between, so I have to move energy. And then usually, depending on the day, but it's usually at night, I have all this creative energy. So it just wants to go into music. So that's like my creative time. I'm in the zone. So, so the creativity has been even stronger because of all the sacred sexuality work, the tantra work. It's been like helping me on such a creative realm and getting into my own unique sound as well, like finding out, like going past my boundaries of like what does Antakarana really sound like, and how far can I go, and how does this feel, how does it make someone else feel? So yeah.
Damn, I love it. We're gonna leave links to the music and the show notes, of course. And yeah, I just have to say too, like on a personal level, the more I learn to work with my own energy, for me, I've been an artist my whole life. So it's starting to come out more with painting and like getting back into art again. And you're right. I get to see clients during the day, get to do some painting at night.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
it's a whole vibe. Like it's a
Yeah.
whole lifestyle. So I love that. I absolutely
I
love
love
that.
Amazing.
So what do you have going on in your business right now? How can people find you and how can they work with you?
Yeah. So I'm going to be teaching Yoni Yoga February 22nd. And that's a form of learning how to do pelvic floor practices, and also working with the jade egg as well. but really coming from a place of the Eastern practices of energy and understanding all that and how that impacts our pelvic floor area. And if you've been suffering from incontinence or just like a weak pelvic floor, or you feel like your orgasms have been like a genital sneeze, these all impact, and lack of creativity, that's a big one. But other than that, I love working with people one-on-one because we all have our unique story. And to have a sacred container where you can just go really deep into that, I do provide for men and women. So that's available. Yeah.
Fantastic. I love it. We'll leave your links in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
And of course, to wrap us up today, Baljit, I have to know, what does being a mystic mean to you?
Yeah. I love this question. To me, being a mystic is kind of like seeing beyond the illusions, but also connecting to like a deeper level of your truth. And when I think about going beyond the illusions, it's like being able to go into these unseen realms. And that's how I think about the Akashic realms. It's kind of like this unseen realm of, of truth. And also at the same time, still being able to ground in reality, like really ground into the body and have that presence. So to me, being a mystic is about like integrating that wisdom from the etheric realm into the physical realm.
Yes. Yes, yes. And any tips for living a more mystical life?
Yeah, connect to your womb, connect to your sacral. I think that is really important. And trusting your own deep inner knowing. Like, I feel like sometimes we can bypass that gut feeling. And I think that's really important. And giving yourself permission to explore what those feelings are and being in this place of surrender and mystery as well. I think that's important. To kind of like allow you to get in touch with that mystical part of yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom that you've shared with us today. Any final messages or anything that we didn't talk about you feel called to share?
No, I feel complete. I feel like if we say any more, it's just going to open up another hour conversation.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Baljit, for coming on the show today. We so enjoyed this conversation. Happy Valentine's, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. The portal is now closed.